many other...
Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast with me, Susan Tehrani. First, look at this hour's headlines. Parts of Israel brought to a standstill after the country's biggest trade unions announced a historic strike against the Netanyahu government's controversial judicial reforms. Heavy Russian shelling in Ukraine's Sloviansk, 2 killed and 29 injured. Reports also of Ukrainian workers withdrawing from the town of Avdiivka amid massive onslaught by Russian troops. At least 6 dead, 12 injured in an alleged suicide blast near Afghanistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Kabul. The area has several government buildings and foreign embassies. Lebanese cabinet votes to move the clocks 1 hour ahead on Wednesday night, reversing the previous decision to postpone daylight savings time by a month. UK's Prince Harry on Monday makes an unexpected appearance at London's High Court for a hearing in a privacy claim launched by celebrities and other figures against the newspaper publisher. The Sunshine Double is very much on for world number 1 Carlos Alcaraz after a straight sets win over Dusan Lajovic in the Miami third round. 2-time Grand Slam finalist Casper Ruud falls to another early exit. After months of demonstration, reports suggest that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may withdraw his controversial judicial overhaul bill. The Prime Minister has been under pressure from all quarters, especially after he sacked his own defense minister. On Sunday, Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant had given a statement calling for a halt to the process of passing the judicial overhaul plan. Under pressure from widespread protests, cracks had started emerging within the ruling coalition since Friday. Israel's economy minister and its culture and sports minister have called the current situation untenable and have said that if Netanyahu decides to stop the legislation, then he should be backed. But the Netanyahu-led government has won the confidence of the House. It survived 2 no-confidence motions filed by the opposition. Earlier in the day, Israel's president Isaac Herzog urged the government to call a halt to the planned legislation, which has ignited some of the biggest nationwide demonstrations in Israel's history. Several sectors across Israel are on strike. More than 20 mayors across the country are on hunger strike. Israel's key airport, Ben Gurion in Tel Aviv, at one point announced that it halted all takeoffs before resuming a few hours later. Workers at Israel's largest port, Haifa, are also on strike. Universities have also announced strikes. Shopping malls are closed. Even McDonald's is closing all its restaurants across Israel. The judicial overhaul, which would give the executive control over appointing judges to the Supreme Court, allows the government to override court rulings on the basis of simple parliamentary majority and has drawn mass protests for weeks now. Okay, for more on this, we are joined by Mohammed Al-Qasim, Middle East Bureau Chief for Media Line. He's joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, Mohammed. We are now hearing that Benjamin Netanyahu, coming under pressure, may actually decide to step back and withdraw his judicial overhaul bill. Is there a possibility for that?
Well, it looks more like it right now. The Prime Minister is under tremendous pressure from all parties, whether domestically or internationally, especially the United States. But the word out is that Prime Minister will give a speech later on in the day today, which has been postponed. I mean, since this morning, we've been hearing that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to give a speech announcing his position and his coalition's position on the possibility of either stopping, withdrawing, or suspending the judicial reforms he intends to push further in the Israeli parliament. But the word now is that he is going to announce in a speech later this afternoon the suspension, not withdrawing, not ending, but the suspension of the controversial judicial reforms that he and his coalition have been pushing for, and in hope that it will basically put at ease and convince the thousands, hundreds of thousands of protesters to go back to their homes, to go back to their work. Today, the whole country, in all practical terms, the whole country is paralyzed. The airport is, workers are on strike. The all ports are pretty much brought to a halt. Hospitals, the health sector, even the Israeli ports have been have shut down. There has been tremendous pressure on the Prime Minister, and that's why what we're hearing out of his office that he may suspend his proposed judicial reforms.
Very interesting. And is this the last that we'll be hearing about this so-called overhaul, considering the fact that many experts believe that, you know, at the end of the day, this fighting has been going on for decades, and it's been politicized for decades now, hasn't it?
Not at all. And as long as Prime Minister Netanyahu is the Prime Minister, I don't think, and he has the same coalition that he has right now, I don't think that we heard the end of it. What we are hearing is suspending, maybe stopping the demonstrations, appeasing the demonstrators, going into some sort of mediation under the auspices of the President Isaac Herzog, and giving the impression that he is pursuing maybe a different path. But the whole thing about these controversial judicial reforms are pushed by not only Mr. Netanyahu, but also other figures within his coalition government. And the top two are Smotrich, the finance minister, as well as Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, who both aren't really enthusiastic or seem to be willing to give up the pushing and making sure that these judicial reforms, as they termed it, are going to stop. And if they are not satisfied by some sort of a promise by the Prime Minister, who himself is on trial right now on 3 different corruption cases, and he needs all the protection that he can get, that means his whole coalition will collapse, and we may be facing another election here in Israel. So the Prime Minister is being careful about how to pursue and approach this whole issue. He wants to give the impression that he's listening to the streets, he's listening to the hundreds of thousands of people out on the streets who are demanding an end to what they call a dictatorship here in Israel. But if these controversial judicial reforms are being, passes. But Smotrich and Ben-Gvir promised that if they don't get what they want, and if these reforms don't get passed, then they will pull out from this coalition, which basically brings an end to this short-lived government, and we may be facing another elections.
Very interesting. Mohammed Al-Qasim, Middle East Bureau Chief for the Media Line, thank you so much for joining us from Tel Aviv, and we look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Onward.
Thank you.
Months of protests. Dissent from within.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu abruptly fired his defense minister.
An angry sacking. As Israel's ruling party lawmakers express their support for protests against the judicial bills, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces the heat. Will his government survive the angry streets? Continuous coverage on WION. World is One.
The United States is set to open its second summit for democracy. The U.S. seeks to establish a united front against authoritarianism. This as Russia-Ukraine war rages on and the challenge from China grows. The U.S. has invited 121 leaders for the three-day meeting. More nations are invited for the mostly virtual summit this time around after some criticism of U.S. navel-gazing in the first summit in 2021. This time, President Joe Biden has tapped co-hosts on each continent. These are the presidents of Zambia, Costa Rica, and South Korea, and the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Washington's focus in Africa is notable in this regard. On the 8 new countries, of the 8 new countries that received the invitation, 5 are in Africa. These include Tanzania, the Ivory Coast, Gambia, Mauritania, and Mozambique. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is on a week-long Africa visit. She landed in Ghana on Monday. Harris met Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo today in Accra. She will be traveling to Tanzania and Zambia after this.
I must say that I'm very excited about the future of Africa. I'm very excited about the impact of the future of Africa on the rest of the world, including the United States of America. When I look at what is happening on this continent and the fact that the median age is 19 years old, and what that tells us about the growth of opportunity, of innovation, of possibilities, I see in all of that great opportunity, not only for the people of this continent, but the people of the world.
The Summit for Democracy will open with a virtual conversation on peace in Ukraine, featuring President Volodymyr Zelensky. There are some countries which are notably missing from the summit. These include Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey. Among European Union states, Biden is not inviting Hungary. The U.S. has also shunned Singapore and Bangladesh in Asia. The political landscape in the United States is heating up. Presidential elections are scheduled for next year, but before that, Republicans need to select their presidential primaries. Given the context, former President Donald Trump held his first election rally in Texas. President Trump used the podium to rail against the prosecutors investigating him. Take a listen.
Weaponization of law enforcement against their political opponent is something straight out of the Stalinist Russian horror show. Prosecutorial misconduct is their new tool, and they are willing to use it at levels never seen before in our country. We've had it, but we've never had it like this. We must stop them, and we must not allow them to go through another election where they have yet another tool in their toolkit.
Trump is being investigated by prosecutors in Manhattan for possible campaign finance violation and hush money case. A special counsel appointed by the Department of Justice is also investigating allegations of the former president hoarding top-secret documents and alleged plans of a plot to overturn the 2020 election. Trump's efforts to lock in the Republican nomination also faces a potential challenge. The contender is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Trump and DeSantis have increasingly clashed lately. Former President Donald Trump is reportedly blackballing anyone who works for his potential Republican rival. One of Trump's campaign aides has declared that anyone who helped with DeSantis' recent book tour persona non grata, the message that Trump is trying to give is that if you work for Ron DeSantis' presidential race, you will not only not work for the Trump campaign, well, that's obvious, but also ever in the Trump White House if the former president is reelected. Earlier, Trump himself took on Ron DeSantis on his social media platform, Truth Social. The former president wrote that Ron DeSanctimonious will probably find out about false accusations and fake stories sometime in the future as he gets older, wiser, and better known. DeSantis, on the other hand, said that it's not important for him to be fighting with people on social media. He says that it's not accomplishing anything for the people that he represents. These incidents are only the latest in a series of jabs between the former president and Ron DeSantis, as both are poised to be the frontrunners for the GOP 2024 presidential nomination. However, it's important to note that Ron DeSantis has not declared his possible candidacy for that run. Recent surveys nonetheless show that Donald Trump is in the lead in the Republican race, at least for now. Taiwan's ex-president Ma Ying-jeou arrived in China, a move termed regrettable by the Taiwanese government. Ma has become the first Taiwanese president, former or current, to visit China in over 7 decades. Ma's arrival was greeted by state officials and party representatives as well at the Shanghai airport as part of his 12-day trip to China. Ma will be meeting with Chinese officials. He will also pay tribute to his ancestors from the mainland and endorse exchange programs for both countries' youth.
很高兴能去，因为除了祭祖之外呢，也带了台湾的大学生到大陆去跟他们交流，希望透过年轻人的热情互动呢，能够改善两岸目前的氛围，让和平呢能够更快、更早的来到我们这里。
Ma's trip has not been received well by the Taiwanese establishment back home. Tsai Ing-wen, the current president of Taiwan, accused Ma of endorsing the Chinese policy on the reclamation of the island nation into Taiwan. Taiwan's ruling party, the DPP, also accused Ma Ying-jeou party, the KMT, of standing with Chinese communists and decried the opposition's decision to not stand united. While Ma has advocated for warmer ties with China, the former president has repeatedly denied being pro-Beijing. A handful of demonstrators were also seen protesting outside Taipei airport prior to Ma's departure. The protesters raised slogans proclaiming Ma's betrayal of Taiwan before they were promptly removed by security forces. Taiwan will be holding presidential elections in 2024, where the KMT and DPP are poised to be at loggerhead. Ma Ying-jeou tenure and the Taiwanese president from 2008 to 2016 was marked by diplomatic warmth between both nations, who also held a summit in Singapore in 2015. China-Taiwan relations significantly deteriorated after Ma's successor, Tsai Ing-wen, came to power. Taipei has accused Beijing of poaching 9 of its allies, leaving only 13 countries officially recognizing the autonomy of the island nation. The recent most setback for Taiwan came from Honduras, after the country broke ties with Taipei and established diplomatic relations with China.
"非常遗憾，就在今天，我们终止了跟洪都拉斯的邦交。长久以来，我们秉持的信念，就是在我们最大能力范围内，透过前瞻务实的做法，支持友邦长期实质的发展。我们不会和中国进行无意义的金钱外交竞逐。"
For the last 1 year, Kyiv has been battling Moscow's attempt to gain control of the country. Ukraine deployed all of its arsenal to defend its territory. But as Ukraine rebuffs Russia's attempt, the war has brought damage to Ukraine's lucrative metal industry. In our next report, we will look at the sector and how it plays an important role to support Ukraine's economy, which is battered by the war. Take a look.
Flak jackets are piled up at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia steel plant. Anti-tank traps guard the entrance. Whenever air raid sirens sound, most workers head to one of the 16 bomb shelters scattered across the sprawling grounds. But to keep the molten metal moving, workers continue to work. Braving not only the intense heat and sparks flying from blast furnaces, they continue to forge steel used in everything from railway cars to household appliances. The southwestern city of Zaporizhzhia, which gives the plant its name, is less than 50 kilometers from the front line. The residential buildings and energy infrastructure are a frequent Russian target. The damage to Ukraine's metal industry has crippled a lucrative sector, a key employer needed to support an economy cratered by war. A pillar of the economy before the war, the metal industry accounted for a third of the goods that Ukraine exported. But it has been upended by Russian forces, who have taken control of the industrial heartland, the Donetsk and Luhansk regions.
When I close my eyes, I see Mariupol. It is so funny. There was a great mood there. We had a successful workflow. We were planning a reconstruction and we were expecting an economically successful year.
For steel and mining company Metinvest, the slowdowns at the Zaporizhzhia steel plant are only part of the pain. Since Russia seized Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula in 2014, the company has lost equipment and facilities in Russian-controlled areas, seen workers head to the front line and lacked enough security to grow, unlike other industrial enterprises in Ukraine. Zaporizhzhia wasn't damaged by artillery fire or missile strikes. But like many others, its growth has been hindered by power outages, damage to infrastructure and blocked Black Sea ports. But almost a year later, it hasn't been able to recover fully. Prices are higher for products Zaporizhzhia makes, and they are harder to get to customers. Instead of ships, trains mostly move the orders, increasing prices not just for transportation, but for production and raw materials.
The time of delivery has increased. Once we were able to produce and deliver within a month or maximum 2 by sea. But now it has increased another 1.5 months longer. And not every client is ready to have this risk. So we were forced to reduce the area to where we can deliver.
The plant used to work with customers in almost 60 countries. That has been reduced by half. Now, the plant focuses on closer European countries and the US market, which can be reached through the Polish seaports. According to reports, about a third of the metal industry's capacity has been destroyed and production is about 65% lower. The KSE Institute of Ukraine estimates from the war, damage to Ukrainian businesses amounts to nearly $13 billion and economic output shrank by about a third in 2022. The Economy Ministry forecasts growth of only 1% this year. Moreover, the government is relying on donations from its allies like the EU and US to pay its citizens with wages and pensions, helping it avoid printing money that could fuel inflation. Last week, the war-torn country got a boost from a $15.6 billion International Monetary Fund loan package. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Thank you so much for staying with us and watching WION Live broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani, but don't go away. More news and headlines coming up next on WION World is One.
There are many other